Good evening, everybody. It's 6:02 p.m. on October 3rd, 2024. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Board. I'm Mike Capuano. I'm Chairman of the Planning Board. With me tonight is our Vice Chair, Amelia Aboff, our Clerk, Jahan Habib, and our members, Michael McNeely and Luke Schuster. We have a quorum tonight. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A video recording of these proceedings will be available on the website, city website, or by emailing planning@somervillema.gov. This meeting is being recorded. We have certain items on our agenda that have requested continuances. One is 45 Mystic Avenue, Planning and Zoning 22-029, who has requested a continuance to the October 17th meeting. Chair moves to continue that agenda item to October 17th, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can I have a roll call?
Sure, this is Steve Carey in the Planning Division. Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Amelia Aba.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if in anticipation of the joint hearing, do we expect to hear cases at our next meeting, or for any of the continuances, should we entertain pushing them further?
So here's my thought. This very next one, so give me 1 second.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. 74 Middlesex Avenue has requested a continuance to October 17 as well. And so the chair moves to continue that item to the 17th, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can I have a roll call?
Sure. Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Amelia Aba.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
So to address your question, Amelia, if you recall, 74 Middlesex Avenue was opened, I think, or continued a few weeks ago because they were trying to work out somewhat of a technical legal issue in getting certain easements recorded so that they can move forward with the application. It's a pretty, in my opinion, it's pretty simple and ministerial application to correct some language in a condition that just requires a vote by the board. So my expectation is we'll probably take that one up if the applicant is ready to go at 6 o'clock. We'll be able to get through. I anticipate that that application and probably be able to vote on it somewhat quickly within that 6 to 6:30 window. I do not anticipate opening Mystic Avenue up. First of all, I'm not sure if they're ready, if they will be ready to go on the 17th, or they'll be requesting another continuance. I just don't know. But under the assumption that they are not seeking another continuance, my feeling would be to not open them before 6:30, because we'll have a joint hearing that could take quite a while, and it is not my inclination to open up new business following the joint hearing, unless it goes 10 minutes long, which I don't think is going to be the case.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, I honestly, Steve, just here before we move on to the other items on the agenda, do you anticipate having anything else that's going to be noticed for the 17th outside of the joint hearing and the 2 items that we continued?
Yes, there is one use special permit that's being noticed for the 17th. Because at the time we noticed it, we weren't certain that joint hearing was happening. So we went ahead and advertised it. But that applicant is aware that it's very likely they'll be continued.
Okay. So we'll be juggling possibly 2 or 3 applications, one of which we might be able to bang out before the joint hearing. That's good. All right. We have some minutes from September 5. Has everybody had a chance to review it? Does anybody have any suggested revisions to the draft minutes? Seeing none, the chair moves to adopt the draft minutes of September 5, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can you call the roll?
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Amelia Aba.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye, we have minutes. We are productive. The next item on the public agenda, at least, is 393 Highland Avenue. 393 Highland Ave has 2 different applications for two different requests for relief, one of which has already been opened and heard. That's planning and zoning 00000058 for a special permit for a fitness use. And they have a second one that they need to come before us for. That's planning and zoning 00000089. And that has not yet been opened. So I'm going to ask the clerk of the planning board to please read into the record the notice of public hearing for that particular agenda item.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
My apologies. I'm just bringing up the agenda.
Mhm.
.393 Highland Avenue, ZP 24-0089, 393 Highland Avenue, LLC seeks a special permit to occupy a single commercial space greater than 10,000 square feet in a leasable floor area for a fitness center use.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the applicant's representative for 393 Highland Avenue, I see Adam, who's had his screen shared. If there is anybody on your client's team, Adam, that feels like they need to be recognized and made a panelist or whatever, let me know.
Yeah, I think Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street in Somerville, representing the applicant 393 Highland Ave LLC. Some hands are going up, I think, in case the board has questions. Mark Harrington from HealthWorks, Peter Quinn, the architect, Gorka Bravo from the ownership group, and Brooke Helgerson, who is HealthWorks architect, would be good to promote just in case there are any questions.
Sure.
I'd also, if I could share my screen, Steve. we did make a full presentation on this project last time.
Yes.
To establish a fitness services use of over 10,000 square feet in a pedestrian street district. I don't want to necessarily belabor that unless you want me to, but I do, I guess, because you opened a new case, I should probably, at least just for the record, quickly zip through the slide set in case people weren't here last time.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Just, bear in mind, we have heard most of it before, but we've got a new, for the purpose of timeliness.
Understood. I will be quick. So as you can see, if you can see my screen here, this is 393 Highland Avenue, the old Rite Aid / Osco / Brooks Pharmacy. You've got the municipal parking lot on the side. You've got the bike path and parking in the back. It's in the, as we said, the pedestrian street district, which was one of the special permits. It's also very close to the Red Line MBTA station, has a bus stop next to it and a municipal parking lot next to it. You can see here, there's the property on the map. The building takes up pretty much most of the property. Highland Ave on the bottom, municipal parking lot on the back, the MBTA property, the bike path and such on the rear. And then the side of it really dead ends into Ellington Street over here. There is proposed bike parking, short-term bike parking, which blown up here, putting 9 short-term spaces in the front. And that is the compliant requirement. And then inside, we would be doing over here, we're doing the front, the long-term parking spaces that are required for bikes. Here, there is no car parking, clearly, because the building is the lot. There never has been parking for this building. But like I said, it abuts the municipal parking lot, the bike path, the Red Line stations right down the street. And there's a bus stop right next door to it at the municipal parking lot. And you can see the interior fitness layout where this will be a HealthWorks gym. There's a proposal to put a mural on the side of the building facing the municipal parking lot. The Highland Ave's to the right on this picture. And these are the elevations. As you can see, work is being done on the property right now under a prior building permit to reopen the windows and fix the building up. It's looking great, but that is separate from this use special permit, obviously. So there were about 34 emails of support that were submitted. There was no opposition, as you recall, raised at the last hearing, nor in the writing. So unless the chair or the board have any questions, I think that probably finishes my presentation.
And am I misremembering maybe a different building? Did that building used to have a mural on it years and years and years ago?
It did. There was a mural, good memory. There was a mural on the side that ran the entire side of the building that
That's what I thought.
fell apart and got painted over or removed at some point because it was all flaking and getting destroyed. So this is kind of nice this is the same side where that mural was. However, it will not go the whole length of the buildings. If you've seen, a bunch of those window openings that have been bricked up years ago have been reopened to make windows. So obviously the mural can't go there, but the mural is going to be about 1,000 square feet. It's not a small mural.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that. I don't have any questions for you outside of that one. I don't know if the board does. We're going to have to open up this particular application for testimony, but we'll see what we have. Does anybody have any questions before I open up testimony? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to open up this public hearing for public testimony. For anybody that would like to speak in support of the application, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Once, twice. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing and open it up to anybody that would like to testify in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern about it. Please raise your hand. Once, twice. Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing and I will open it up to any further discussions by members of the planning board. I just got a text from our staff liaison, Steve. He's having some internet issues. I imagine this is still being recorded for the purpose of a public hearing. But I think Steve might be a little bit held off. But let's
Steve Carey, just chiming in. Apologies for that. My internet seemed to go out briefly. Might make you a co-host of the meeting. So in the event that I lose internet again.
okay. Yeah, that's a good
And I'll
idea.
just, if my internet dropped again. Apologies for that.
Yeah, no, you just sound like you're calling in from Jupiter or something, so. Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Adam or the applicant team? Okay. Steve, you're still with us to hear me and call a roll?
I am, yes.
Okay. Then in that case, with no further questions here, I'm going to take up, we're going to have to take two separate votes on this. The first one is going to be on the establishment of a fitness use. So following public testimony, review of the submitted materials and deliberation of the required considerations and findings outlined by the ordinance, I move to approve with the conditions laid out in the staff memorandum, the special permit to establish a fitness service use on the first floor facing a pedestrian street in the CC4 zoning district with the conditions as described. Steve, can you please call the roll on this particular
Sure.
application?
Johan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Okay, 393 Highland Ave LLC seeks a special permit to occupy, following public testimony, review of the submitted materials and deliberations of the required considerations and findings outlined by the ordinance. I move to approve with conditions laid out in the staff memorandum. The special permit to occupy a single commercial space greater than 10,000 square feet in the leasable floor area for a fitness center use in the CC4 zoning district with the conditions described in the staff memorandum. Seconded by Amelia, who, by the way, seconded the last motion. Steve, can I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Johan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Amelia Aba,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Congratulations all.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much for
Good
your,
luck.
for
Appreciate
yours.
it.
Before I go, can I ask you just sort of a programming question? You'd mentioned the 17th hearing.
Yes.
And as the person who has the case on for the 17th, the use special permit for the veterinary clinic going into pedestrian street district, is the
Mhm.
intent to that could zip through quickly on that night, or is it going to get bumped, do you think?
That one, I don't know. We haven't opened that one yet, Adam, right?
No.
There's so we're going to take one that's already been opened and it's fairly ministerial, and we can get definitely through that within the first 30 minutes. What I don't want is to open you at like 6:20, have a little presentation, and then have to stop you for the next 4 hours while we're in a land use committee hearing, and then reconvene at 10:30 at night.
Understood.
So
Yeah.
just based on that, I don't know. I would probably not take you before 6:30, and depending on what's on the land use committee agenda, depending on when that finishes, maybe take you up after it. I just, it doesn't suit anybody to start a presentation, cut it in the middle, and then reconvene, several hours later when everybody's, tired and, forgot what you said 3 hours ago.
Yeah, I do it. It's very similar in this case to this case, which is why I mentioned it, in the fact that the applicant is under a time crunch with investors, and then the fact that it's just a use special permit facing a pedestrian street where there's not been any opposition showing up at the neighborhood meeting. It's gonna, there's really, I don't have slides that much because we're not changing the building. It's just the
Mhm.
use. So I'm just, no, I don't want to get into it. I'm just saying that. Just so
No,
you
no,
know what's
I
going
get
on.
that. If it makes sense to do it before 6:30, and honestly to get another case off of the docket, that seems pretty straightforward, which I imagine yours will be, then maybe we can.
It's pretty straightforward.
But I don't think I've seen the materials yet. So
Yeah, understood. Just wanted to know whether to show up on the 17th or not, but I'm happy to do so either way. I know the client would surely like me to. So
yeah,
but
let's
that was it.
let's do this. I want to have a chance to take a look at those materials and confer with Steve and with Amelia. And if we think that this is something that might make sense to kick a few weeks, we'll let him know to maybe give you that heads up.
Yeah, he gave us the heads
and
up, like
similarly
it's-
to the contrary.
Yeah, he did give us the heads up that it could get bumped. But I just wanted, I know the comments from before, I guess that's why I wanted to hear whether or not, when you said you might take one case, whether that meant this case or something else.
But one
Clearly
we've
meant
already
something
opened.
else. So that's fine. That's what I was asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. We're looking forward to HealthWorks opening their gym here in the square.
Great. Have a nice night, everybody.
Bye.
The only issue left on the planning board's agenda is a continuing discussion on our standard conditions. We had I think a really nice beginning of the conversation a couple of weeks ago. Kind of went through the various special permits, and we got some answers via Steve in his email that I think responded to some of our questions. We got some nice data in on some of the questions that were asked. So, Steve, if you can, rejoin us so we can continue this discussion for a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Glad to facilitate. Also glad to answer any questions you guys might have about what I put in that the board packet email.
So there is a difference between optional and depends.
Yes. Depends is more dependent on if the development being considered meets certain thresholds, then it would be appropriate, then it sort of, they could think of these as conditions that are sort of triggered based on square footage or some particulars of the use, whereas then optional is something that the board more has the option to. It's not something that's consistently applied, but something that is sort of optional, that's more if the board feels based on the particular circumstances should be applied, if that sort of makes sense. So depends is more like sort of triggers, like a certain use, like for example the the sort of mobility conditions associated with cannabis retail, those are depends, and it's dependent on whether, if it is a cannabis retail use, then that's has been applied before, whereas optional is a little bit more at the board's discretion. Not that they all are essentially at the board's discretion, but
Yeah, I think that was what how I was thinking about that difference, but I'm glad you were able to put a finer point on it. So I appreciate that. Elsewhere in your email, you gave us examples of the written narrative of the descriptive checklist, the two fairly sizable applications. And I know in our conversation earlier today, Steve, you indicated that not there isn't a particular form. It's kind of at the discretion of the applicant and how they work with ISD and your team. And you and I talked about maybe getting some of those written narratives or checklists on some more kind of traditional projects instead of the D1 block, which is obviously enormous.
Right.
And done by teams of attorneys and planners and architects and all sorts of things and engineers. So yeah, you and I talked about getting a couple of examples from like several unit buildings and
right.
things like this, the application that we probably just looked at, kind of more of the standard stuff that we see instead of the much more complicated things, just so we have an idea of what we're looking at and how we might want to address it.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll try to find one from more recently that ideally this particular makeup of the board has approved, so it'll be hopefully a little fresher in your memory, because I think everyone on the board here has been on the board long enough that there should be, well, I'd like to think there is a development out there that has gone through site plan approval or special permit for the use that is now at that phase where they would be submitting a checklist that this board composition has seen.
Okay. You gave us some updates on the cannabis zoning moratorium.
Yes. So just wanted to I checked in with Emily Hutchings, who's been sort of the planner that's been most across this. The 14-month moratorium, 18-month moratorium. I know that it's a moratorium that began some time ago. So the special permits that you guys have been seeing are all for dispensaries that got their HCA, their host community agreement, done before that moratorium. It won't be up until May of next year. So after there's a special permit coming for something on Mystic Ave, I believe, over in East Somerville. Once make a determination on that one, that should be the last one that the board sees for at least several months. I would say probably, I would imagine well after the moratorium lifts in May, because I think my guess is there'd be some time that it would take for another HCA to be hammered out.
Okay. And you gave us some data relative to the building permits that were generated as a result of the MBTA Communities Act that was passed.
Yep. Looks like
by the city council.
Yeah, looks like Luke, maybe you have a question.
I had questions not related to the cannabis shops, but I also saw Amelia had her hand up too, so I don't know if before I did.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Luke. Yes, I had another comment on the checklist topic, which I'm happy to hold until we have a more fulsome discussion of that, if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
If you think the question makes sense to ask now, sure. I mean, we're kind of going over things and there's no real format, so.
Maybe just to the extent to ask Steve to think about it between now and our next meeting. But as I reviewed this sort of sample checklist for these larger projects that were provided, one thing I started to wonder in terms of like how we can facilitate compliance, which I think was the angle we were coming at this from, is to the extent that staff is already putting together a list of conditions in the staff memorandum or in the decision that is issued to the applicant, would there be any value in like formatting whatever the applicant's final approval version is as a checklist that includes things like, and I'm looking at the one of the samples you sent, the comment says like to be evaluated by and like time frame for compliance so that it's painfully clear and what the path is. I don't want to create work for your team, but just thinking about like low hanging fruit ways to get people and ISD focused up.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's, we draft these decision documents. And if somewhere along the line, I imagine it's ISD, then takes that and turns it into sort of a checklist format. But if we can draft these decisions in a checklist format, yeah, that might be a way to, be efficient about it.
Maybe it's redundant if that's what ISD is already doing, just if it's something that we think people are getting tripped up in, just a thought. Anyway, it can be part of a broader conversation. Just wanted to raise it for your consideration.
No, that's a good thought.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Luke?
Yes, this is jumping back to the conditions for cannabis shops in the context of this about to be interim period where there's one more of the pre-moratorium shops that's going to come before us shortly. As I was just thinking this through and reflecting on the conversation we had at the last meeting, I feel like there was either direct mention or maybe just my sense of the discussion was an assumption that because there's only one more going to come to us, that we would just continue all the conditions that were made of the first 14. But I wanted to just raise that, and maybe that's just the substance of the conversation when that case comes before us. But if there's actually an emerging consensus among us that some of those conditions don't make sense anymore, I don't see why we would actually necessarily want to even do it for the 15th. And might we consider, and maybe this all relates back to the fact that we are actually going to invite all the shops that are already in operation to come back and apply to have the appointment only condition taken away anyway. So maybe I'm coming roundabout to thinking we've already addressed this anyway, but I'd like to confirm, I guess. Do we feel like we have a clear plan for getting these conditions in the right place, given where we are a few years into this?
So I don't know if we necessarily, I didn't consider inviting them to affirmatively come back to revise the condition. I was more thinking of if you've been in operation and we are thinking about changing these conditions going forward, and assessing the applicant that has come before us already to change the one of its conditions. If somebody wants to come to us on their own initiative, we'll certainly take them up, and probably hold them to the same standard that we're assessing. But I didn't see us in a position of affirmatively inviting people to come back and change conditions to which they've previously agreed.
Just a response to that, and there's some nuance here, and I actually think some of this discussion was a couple meetings prior, maybe even one that you weren't at, Michael. But was the sense that we weren't, others who were part of this, help me out on your recollections too, but that for the Union Square one, that's going to come back to us soon because their 6 months of operation will have ticked. We told them we would consider waiving their appointment only requirement once that 6 month has ticked without a traffic study, if they have reasonable assurances to us based on traffic patterns in the store that we wouldn't expect something crazy to happen. And that in that discussion, we were a little worried about giving them special treatment. So the way we would avoid it feeling like special treatment was not a formal invitation, but some statement at our public meeting that I thought maybe we actually did, that we would entertain other existing shops to come do something similar. That feel roughly like what we talked about, or not quite?
It could have been. I just don't know if this board should necessarily be in the position to invite previous applicants to come back and change the conditions that we all agreed on. My guess is there is some sort of an industry newsletter or discussion board or meeting that they're going to know if the guys in Union Square get a condition change, and if they want it, they can do it too. You know, I don't know if anybody pushed the Union Square guys to come before us, or if we invited them to, but I just don't know if we should be in the position of saying, please come to us to change something that we already agreed to. It should be, I think, in my opinion, probably up to the business sense of the individual applicant, whether they want to do it, whether they are aware. If they're not aware of the of the policy change, I kind of hate to say it, I mean, that's on them, right? You know, it's they're business people. You know, they're involved in a particular industry, and if something changes in your industry and you're not aware of it, maybe maybe your business isn't necessarily going to be as successful as somebody who keeps up with what's happening. We can certainly welcome, yeah, we'll take the application, we'll take the request, you know, for sure. And they can point to what happened in, you know, what might happen in Union Square, if we go down that path. But I'm a little hesitant as one member to say everything we talked about a couple of years ago, you know what, forget it. We've decided to change our mind, to come back and we'll wipe the slate clean. It's like, you know, I expect for business people to be able to take care of their own business. Yeah, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luke, in my memory of this conversation, part of how this had come about for the applicants for whom this was relevant was that they had gone to the Cannabis Commission for a repeal of the equivalent condition and had gotten traction on that, and were then sort of made aware that they also had the step of going through the planning board. So my expectation would be, and I hear Michael's desire not to do something that is sort of proactive outreach in any way, but my expectation would be that amongst the planning staff and the staff who are sort of interfacing with the Cannabis Commission, that when an applicant is going through that process to relieve that condition on at that board level, that they would likely become aware of the opportunity to, or the need to repeal amend the parallel condition with our board. And I don't know if that's something that I don't know how you would feel about sort of entrusting that to the staff level, but I believe that all of the businesses that currently have the condition in place by us also have the condition in place by that board. So, and certainly the industry seems to be aware of the opportunity to modify that at that board. Does that make sense? Just as an option, I guess.
Can I try and partially respond, Amelia, and also add a thought? My partial response to Amelia is, I want to make sure I'm tracking all the boards involved in these requirements. So there's us, the Cannabis Control Commission. Is that the state's Cannabis Control Commission?
I'm sorry, I think I
city-wide
said,
city?
I'm sorry, I was not using the correct terminology. I'm referring to the Somerville level. Is that the licensing board? I think.
Yeah,
I
license commission.
Accurately, I'm sorry.
Yep, license commission is what it would be. And then you're correct. The Cannabis Control Commission is at the state level.
So I think all of these businesses have the parallel condition enforced by the Somerville Marijuana Licensing Commission. Is that?
It's just the licensing commission,
licensing commission.
alcohol, cannabis, yeah,
Right,
all of
okay.
it, yeah.
So when my hope would be that when they come to the licensing commission for that condition to be repealed, that there would be some communication at the staff level that they either need to or can make that modification with us as well.
Yeah, and on my end, my point is not to do some advertising campaign to the businesses to open the floodgates, but just, the reason this feels relevant to this discussion is at some point, the world changes over the course of years, and we might think standard conditions that we've been requiring don't make sense anymore. And so I think maybe this doesn't happen often, but this to me is an example where I bet if I were on the board at the beginning of these cannabis shops, I would have thought this requirement made sense. 3 years later, our concern is exactly the opposite, that these businesses aren't thriving and there's not enough customers. So the last thing I'm worried about is long lines at these stores. So it seems like this is a condition that just doesn't make sense anymore. So how do we as a board just act in a thoughtful, nimble way to allow for those changes? And we're in an interesting spot here where there's going to be a 15th coming to us soon. And then not many for a while, but there's 14 others that are existing, and just whatever we can do to thoughtfully allow something to change without too much process, I think would be a nice way to do it.
I understand where you're coming from, Luke. I just don't know if I want to be in the position of just helping sophisticated businessmen run their business. That I can or they can't. You know, the industry will talk. They will be aware of opportunities that will be available to them. You know, why, if we do this for them, you know, for this particular industry on this particular condition, what happens when we've changed our mind on maybe other things? Do we, you know, on for example, the real brick, or, you know, whatever it might be that we like? Do we go back to every applicant or make it widely known that we don't care about real brick anymore? I just, businesses are businesses. I don't want to have to do their job for them. You know, if they want to come back to us knowing that there's now a pathway for them to amend a condition, that should be up to them.
To be clear, I'm fine with doing no outreach at all on our end, other than, I guess, if they watch a meeting, maybe they see that our sense has changed on things. But amongst us, do we all agree loosely that, like, we might change our mind on a vote like this sometime if conditions on the ground change? And just because we've done standard conditions for a subset in the past doesn't mean we'll never change what those standard conditions are, right? That's the key thing I just want to check. I mean, or we'll just vote our conscience when that moment comes, I guess, or something.
I just, if I can say in response, Luke, like, I think this is a relatively unusual situation, and, you know, Michael and Steve particularly, you know, please let me know based on your everyone, but like thinking about just the types of conditions that we enforce, I think the vast majority of them are, because of the nature of the board, really about the sort of physicality of the building and the development. There should not be that many that deal with operations where there like is a thing that can happen after the fact that we have any influence over. To, you know, if we were to repeal a condition on the use of, to Michael's example, dimensional brick, no one's going back to rebuild their building with a new material because we changed it, right? So like most of our decisions are this one like snapshot in time. And then there's this weird section that is specific to uses. I think it's really like operating hours and this, and transit subsidies, I think. And, you know, maybe as we go through, we can look at them, but I don't know whether it makes you feel more strongly one way or the other. I can see it cutting either way, but I think it's a relatively narrow slice of situations that we're dealing with here. I just wanted to say. They're outside of our primary scope.
Yeah, Michael.
Thank you. Amelia, that's a really interesting layer to the problem I wasn't really thinking a lot about, but that may simplify a lot of the concerns that I think Luke and I both have shared about not having a space for us to evolve in our enforcement practices, for lack of a better phrase. I do wonder, Luke, do you have any ideas of how we might be able to more methodically approach changing our view on certain restrictions? In this particular case, we have a very convenient moratorium, right? That's a clear delineation point in time for me as a member to see an opportunity for us to say, well, this is how we initially thought policy should be. Let's pause now that we're pausing applications in general. Let's look at what the policy should look like going forward. And that allows us to have a space that's equitable for all applicants. And we're not just ad hoc deciding, hey, I had a spicy burrito that day, and so I just really was hard on the rules for this one applicant, or have something subjective to the next applicant, right? Do you have any thoughts at first glance, Luke, anybody, about whether or not there's another check-in point, barring a moratorium like the one that we have for the cannabis shops? I guess to just also, sorry, Amelia, not to stop you from going, but to elaborate, I would be worried about ad hoc policy making, and policy is not the right word, but suddenly changing our attitude towards requirements for applicants on a particular application. Like, I would feel better saying, we as a board believe that this is the type of thing that should be implemented, and unless there's a very specific, very specific reason, we shouldn't be deviating, on the fly. So sorry, Amelia, to stop you.
No, I was just gonna say, if I agree with the thought that sort of it would be nice for there to be a systemic approach so that it isn't something where we're discussing issues regarding conditions when an applicant comes to us with something relevant, and the review of the standard conditions seems like it's something that's time consuming, so I don't think it's something that we would want to do too frequently, but I can imagine agreeing every, call it 2 years, to put a meeting on the books that was dedicated to go through them and discuss any changes that we think are appropriate, or something that was to that type of system, if just throwing that out there.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In broad terms, I do agree with Member McNeely's thoughts, and I certainly agree with Madam Vice Chair's thoughts as well. I think there should be a component that allows us to review or discuss some of the pertinent conditions that we may have encountered, whether it's the 2-year period or some other period, based on our experiences as a board. But what I would also add is that if it would be helpful to get some staff input as well, because I know staff members have been dealing with, the potential applicants, fielding questions and just interfacing with businesses and other members of the community, so that we do get a fuller picture, not just in those instances where we have an applicant presenting in front of us as a board. I think that's really important, because as we look through, obviously this cannabis related matter came through with the moratorium, and there were other factors that brought this matter to the forefront. However, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of some of the other items or matters that may have evolved. I mean, just as an example, I could say that up until recently, and I can't really speak to the changing interest rate environment, but we did see a reduction in, let's just say, laboratory related development activity, and that's something that I'm sharing just based on my views, readings, anecdotes, all of those things. But I do think that it's important for us to consider all facets here, and that's where the staff input will be very critical. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't know if we're going to come to a consensus on this one tonight. I think this is something that we can maybe think about as maybe after the moratorium has ended. Particularly if people come, more people besides the one that's come before us start asking, we can figure out how we want to move forward. The other one that we had discussed was my idea of seeing if there was some sort of a deemed abandonment of a permit, and that's one that, not surprisingly, we're going to be having a discussion with our legal department to see what the avenues are to be able to do something like that, if at all, and if that's something that in any way we can do, we can continue discussion. And if we're told absolutely not, you can never do this, then we at least know that answer. Anything else that people want to talk about as it relates to the items that we were discussing a couple of weeks ago? Yep, Luke.
Thanks. Just on the MBTA community stuff, thanks for pulling those numbers together. Neat to see, some modest but important new housing development activity. The other reason I thought it would be interesting to raise this briefly is just when we were involved in the discussion with the land use committee and made a recommendation around this. One of the concerns was about the loss of the affordability requirement for the third unit. And there was mentioned the idea, maybe after we pass this plan, the kind of modification or improvement we could consider in the future is a density bonus for a fourth unit if it were affordable. So there's still an affordability bonus, but it's on the fourth instead of the third unit. I think that's an interesting idea. And I guess I'm raising it not so much to really debate the merits of that idea right now, but as a for instance of other policy discussions that we might be talking about as a board. Seems like the subcommittee is not happening immediately at least, but is that the sort of policy idea we might consider ourselves, and just could we proactively make a recommendation to the land use committee to consider an additional revision there, building off of the momentum of MBTA communities last year?
I would need to really think about what that would mean. As you know, I wasn't exactly the most enthusiastic vote as it stood with the change in zoning that exists now. But if people want to have that discussion, we can.
A good starting point for that discussion might be one of us taking a rough cut at what the text amendment would look like to achieve that. I just reviewing the list that had been sent. So like Luke, just as one member, like I also still think that having a fourth unit with an affordability requirement would be in a lot of ways ideal. Looking at the list of permit applications, I do see that 2 of them were conversions to 3-family with a backyard cottage fourth unit. And there is a part of me that frankly didn't expect to see that and worries a little bit that enforcing the affordability requirement for the fourth unit would tamp down what might be new interest or viability in sort of the backyard cottage ADU or accessory unit structure. But I think it's definitely worth more conversation.
I'm so glad you raised those examples. Can you help me on how our MBTA communities plan even allows for that? You're saying some of these they were existing 3 units and they're getting a 4th backyard cottage?
They were existing 2 families that have been converted to, hang on, of the data points we have, there was 1 demo of an existing 2-family and construction of a new 3-family with a backyard cottage 4th unit. And there was 1 proposed 3-family with a backyard cottage 4th unit. And I'm not sure what that was replacing. And I have no other information, obviously, I'm just reading off of Steven's email. So.
Yeah, I'm going through and looking at this was I was translating a spreadsheet that I got from ISD. The proposed 3-family with a backyard cottage 4th unit, 35 Richardson Street. To my knowledge, that was a vacant parcel until then. So
just on that one, I thought what the change was just allowing the 3 units. So is there am I missing something, or maybe there's?
I think that there's I think we all need to go back and refresh ourselves on this is one takeaway, but I think that it increased the density for the primary structure, but then Somerville also had on the books the accessory backyard cottage unit type. And I don't know that it necessarily I don't know that anything capped the number of units on the lot. I think there was a density for the primary building that might have been changed in the MBTA zoning, but it's a great question and I don't know the real answer, but I would suspect that might be why we're seeing a 4th backyard unit in both of those cases rather than a 4th in-building unit. I'm making this up. We should all go look it up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't have that readily available, but I'd be glad to get that answer.
And on my mind, really, it's 2 almost entirely separate things. It's this specific policy idea, you know, would be of interest to me to explore, but setting aside the merits of this, I guess I'm asking ourselves, like, is this conceptually the kind of proactive policy discussion that we are wanting to do more of, and if, whether it's in the subcommittee or not? Or
Yes.
it's not quite what the intent was there.
I think this falls exactly within the concept that we had raised, is how does the board become more proactive in thinking about how we think about zoning and make affirmative changes to it. So I think this discussion falls squarely within what at least I had considered, whether it's a full committee meeting or not.
May Mr. Chair add to that, I also see this as perhaps the most clear-cut example that I can think of where we can and should be thinking about improvements, because I, speaking only for myself, was disappointed that the planning board wasn't involved in the MBTA zoning discussion earlier, because that was a major change to the essentially base zoning in most of the city. And that really didn't come to us until it was pretty fully baked. And I say that as someone who was listening in on the land use committee meetings where it was being developed. And I think staff did a great job solving a multidimensional problem within the constraints they were working with. But if we can fine tune it, I think that's very clearly within our purview. And I think if the city hadn't been up against a pretty aggressive timeline that was dictated by the state, there probably would have been more opportunity for sort of iteration in the way that we're currently thinking about.
Yeah, thanks.
Who else? What else? And question. So we had a spreadsheet that that Steve had passed around via a link, and we had gone through one of the spreadsheets and thought about how some of that would work. We have at least 2 others that I'm aware of. And my question is, as we are approaching the 7 o'clock hour, do we want to start? And I think we've had a nice conversation about what we've already talked about, and I think we have at least some idea of what we want to go with it. Do we want to open up another discussion on one of the tabs or one of the spreadsheets now, or do we want to, because this is kind of an ongoing conversation, move it to a different time? Because this seems like it would be a kind of a natural pausing point on the discussion, but how do folks feel? Do we want to eat and watch Thursday Night Football?
I was gonna say, I'm happy to continue on, but I have no idea what the sports are. So if there's something going on at 7 people want to do, I support that.
I mean, the way I look at it, kind of sports irrespective. You know, it's 7 o'clock. We could probably go on. My thought is, if I recall the other Excel document that you sent around, it's somewhat more lengthy than the one we previously discussed. So I'm a little bit hesitant to start it when we could kind of start it afresh in another couple of weeks. Especially if, from what you've been saying, Steve, is some of the applications are going to be potentially cleared out next week or in the next 2 weeks for the land use committee, and we might have some more time to really dig into a new document. Did I hear somebody say something?
Sorry, I was going to make a snarky joke about you wanting to append it to the back of the land use meeting in a couple of weeks, but I'm supportive with your comments about it, this being a meatier and longer discussion. And if the rest of the group is also in that mindset, I'd be okay with postponing.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree, considering the fact that we have the joint meeting with the land use committee coming up for our next meeting, and I for one would like to see some continuity between discussions similar to what we've had this time around, where Stephen and staff have been able to provide some responses, and we're continuing the conversation forward. So I'm in favor of what you've mentioned, along with the other board members as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. I think the meeting on the 17th is probably not going to be the time that we address the next series of conditions, just because it's probably going to be a longer meeting. We're not going to want to reconvene at 8:30 after hearing testimony on several proposed zoning amendments and dealing with one or two of our own cases. So my thought is kick this to the first meeting in November, which is what, 7th, maybe.
The 7th. That's right. 7th.
Yeah, let's put the next or a next series of conditions on for other business on the 7th. And if we can get to them on the 7th, let's definitely try to do that, or at least stop the process. Because we have a couple of cases, obviously we're going to take those first. And if there are, I don't know, 40 conditions we need to go through, if we get through 15, 20 of them, we can ask our questions on those, come back and meeting following, discuss what we've already discussed, and maybe take the next 5 to 10 to 15 or whatever it might be. Then we can just keep chugging along. Okay.
Yep. And so you guys see that on the depends tab for the standard conditions for buildings, there is a column that says when, and that you guys can think of as the trigger for that condition.
Thank you so much, Steve, for all of your work pulling this together for us. We really, really appreciate it.
Sure, glad to.
And Steve, for the next meeting, could you, when you send out the agenda and the links, do you mind just resending the link to that
For sure.
Drive doc?
Yes, absolutely.
Folder at least. Okay. Thank you. 'Cause I have it. I just have to keep searching.
No, I get it. Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna wait like 20 seconds, so it's 7 o'clock on the dot. Here we go. With no further business before the planning board, the chair moves to adjourn, and we'll reconvene at 6 o'clock on the 17th, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can you call the roll?
Sure. Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Luke Schuster,
Hi.
Amelia Aba.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye, at 7 o'clock, we are adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Thank
Aye.
you.
Thank you
Everybody.
so much. Take care.